If you love OLED as much as I do, then this may be one of the most strongest and conflicting questions you have to ask yourself. And that is, do you go for the 27-inch or do you go for the 32-inch or do you get the LG 4K that also doubles down as a 1080p 480Hz? And here's where the ultimate answer for you is going to be, which are you going to utilize the most? And we're going to go through all the ups and downs in today's video. But for me personally, I'm going to come out straight away and say my personal pick is the 32-inch Samsung QD OLED panel in the Gigabyte implementation. Now, this was sent to me as a review sample, and also the one beside it, the ASRock, was sent as a review sample, which we're taking a look at in today's video. And this is the PG032 UFS. But then the Alienware, the AW2725Q, I got this on a sale. I just could not resist when I saw the price of this thing. It was 900 Australian dollars delivered to my door, which is around 600 USD. And for an OLED, especially a 4K 240Hz, this marks, I believe, a new level of value. And it's not just value, it's end game value, because all these panels here, they're all in that end game tier. It's just, for me personally, we're looking at roughly an 8.5 out of 10 versus a 9.5 out of 10 versus roughly a 9 out of 10 for my personal preferences and what I need. And we will start off, however, this first part of the comparison with the Samsung QD OLED flavors, the 27-inch versus the 32-inch, because it's probably one of the most asked questions if you're in the market for one of these monitors, which do I pick? And here's where we're going to look at the biggest difference here, and that is the size, but also the pixel density, where something that I feel is misleading in the whole monitor space is the pixels per inch. And where I measured it manually on the 32-inch, it was roughly 138 pixels per inch. And then when I measured it on the 27-inch, it was roughly 162 pixels per inch manually. And here's where I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that the 32-inch is roughly 37% bigger. You get 37% roughly more screen space on the 32-inch. But here's where, if we look at that pixels per inch, that's nowhere near 37% larger. Because here's where this measurement, and this is the misleading part of it, it's only measuring pixels per inch in a straight line. In other words, there's only 138 pixels for the 32-inch stacked on one another in a straight line. But that's not density. If we look at density, we've got to look at a square measurement here. And here's where, if we square these numbers, that's where if we go to the 32-inch, we get then roughly 19,000 pixels per inch squared. Then if we go to the 27-inch, we then get roughly 26,000 pixels per inch squared. So that's where the biggest difference is coming from here, where you're going to have a sharper image on the 27-inch, but the reason you may be wondering then is, why wouldn't you go with the 27-inch over the 32? Well, let's find out right after today's video sponsor. Do you need to get Windows activated and don't want to spend stupid amounts of money on a key? Well, if that's you, then today's video sponsor, SCD Keys, has you covered. For as little as $21 for Windows 11 Pro or $13 for Windows 10 Enterprise, you can get activated instantly. And also, don't forget to use the coupon code BFTYC for a big juicy discount. Links in description below. And that's where it gets down to simply the pixels just being too dense for a monitor, in my opinion. In fact, I noticed with the 27-inch, it feels like it's a bit over sharpened at times. When the 32-inch, I feel like it just gets the balance perfect. And it's such an immersive experience. Not just having that extra space there, that extra 37% screen space, but also having that just balance of not being too sharp, where I feel like the pixel density of the 27-inch is making it so that it looks so at times over sharpened. And in fact, to get sort of, for me, the best image, I have to sit fairly close to the 27-inch. Roughly around 40 centimeters away from it, it does look absolutely gorgeous. But as opposed to 32-inch, I can have it a bit further back on my desk. It's much more comfortable, and it's much more comfortable on my eyes. Having the 27-inch so close to my eyes for the best, what I feel is usable experience in this, has it so that my eyes get tired after a couple of hours of using it. So for me personally, that's where the 32-inch wins over the 27-inch when we're looking at these Samsung QD OLED panels. And that's the biggest difference. But also there is another key difference, and that is on the standard definition range brightness uniformity test I did here. This is just a white background across the field. We're testing for the max CCD brightness, and then we're maxing the brightness on the monitor during this test. And here's where we got 210 roughly CCD brightness. The uniformity was the best on the Dell, however, where it's basically 210 all around. But then on the Gigabyte, it's going up to around 240. So you are getting more max brightness out of the Gigabyte. And then going on to the ASRock or the LG 32-inch, you're getting roughly 265 nits max brightness at 4K, 240 Hertz on these panels. So the LG does have the best brightness out of the three, but when we're looking at the 32-inch Samsung version versus the 27-inch, we're getting a bit over 10% extra brightness out of the 32-inch, whilst it's also a bigger, more immersive experience. So those two key factors is what separates the 32-inch from the 27-inch. However, there may be also another question within that, and that is, why are you picking the 32-inch Samsung over the 32-inch LG? And this is probably another big question on your mind, and that is simply because the Samsung just looks more vibrant. It just comes through, the colors are coming through better, and it also just looks a little bit sharper. And that's due to the main difference I can see between these two panels is not just the Samsung is making their own OLED technology versus LG, it's also the fact that they're just going with a gloss panel versus a coating on the LG, which is a semi-matte. Now, keep in mind, this is probably the best implementation of a semi-matte coating I've ever seen on the LG. It does do a great job of reducing glare and minimizing and blurring reflections, but it does so still at a cost of reduced saturation ever so slightly, as well as slightly reduced clarity. And so that's where, for me personally, I'm in an environment where I can control the sunlight, and I really actually prefer gaming in a darker environment. So if you prefer gaming in a sunlit environment, or simply you cannot control sunlight in the area where you need to use these monitors, the LG might automatically win for you. That's just, again, coming down to what you need for your needs. Though, another thing about the LG, and this is the crazy interlude I'm going to say here, is it's also got the ability to stop down to 480 Hertz at 1080p. And coming into this, I thought, like when I first heard about it, I thought it'd be a gimmick. I thought, oh yeah, who really needs 480 Hertz? Only those crazy top-end pros are going to need this. But this is where, no joke, I turned it on for the first time, went into Counter-Strike 2, played a deathmatch, and I did the best I've ever done in a deathmatch by actually quite a big margin. It was just like, wow, this is no gimmick. It can even help regular plebs. Like, I'm not going to be going for some crazy CS2 tournament money anytime soon, but still, I do like to play competitively. And I was just really shocked at myself being able to play a lot better at 480 Hertz 1080p as opposed to 2K 240 Hertz. Even though I prefer the immersive experience of the 2K 240 Hertz, and perceptually, I can't really tell the difference between 480 Hertz and 240 Hertz. I feel like after 240 Hertz, it just feels just buttery smooth in general after 240 Hertz. And 360 feels very similar to 240, and so does 480. So that's my personal thoughts on it, but regardless, I was still playing the best I'd ever played in a deathmatch on this 480 Hertz when I turned it on. It was also my first time using it. So I don't believe it's a gimmick after using it. So if you're serious about being at a pro level and your PC can support 480 Hertz, then that's also an advantage that the LG has. So it's got the best brightness, got that extra mode there, got the semi-matte coating, but then the Samsung QD OLED 32-inch just has that richer and more immersive experience, which for me personally, playing games, I really enjoy it the most on the 32-inch. And so that's the separating factor there, making my personal pick the 32-inch Samsung QD OLED. Now you may be thinking, well, 32-inch LG, it's got its own merits, 32-inch Samsung QD OLED's got its own merits. What do I need the 27-inch for? And here's where it comes down to simply, this is the value king. When I look at the prices, it's coming in Australia significantly cheaper. And then in the US, it's also coming in around the 800 US mark versus around 1,000 for the 32-inch. And then the LG's coming in even more expensive than these two options at around 1,100 US. And this is actually mirrored at this point in time in Australia, where it's just coming in a significant chunk cheaper than the 32-inch options. And so if you're looking for, maybe you don't mind the 27-inch, maybe you got a smaller desk, or maybe you just prefer playing more competitively on a smaller monitor, which a lot of pros do play on 27-inch. So if you automatically already prefer a smaller monitor, and the 27-inch is a better price, and that 210 nits of brightness isn't a game changer for you, then this might be the panel of choice for you. Now, one thing I will interlude and say is after this, there are differences between the brands here, but we will quickly go out and say that I tested all the response times on all three of these panels, and they're all absolutely incredible. I also tested the input lag on the ASRock, the Alienware, and the Gigabyte, and they're all sub 5 milliseconds. So there's no differing factor in terms of the actual functionality for gaming, though what there is a big difference for is the out-of-the-box profiles that these monitors carry. There's only one panel here that does the calibration right, or at least close to right, and that's the Gigabyte, where the LG from ASRock, their implementation, their color profile, missed the mark by actually a significant bit when we look at the color accuracy for those who maybe want to do some video editing or photo editing and need color accuracy from their monitor outside of gaming. And it was actually quite a bit, and same with the Alienware, that missed the mark by quite a bit too in their sRGB modes, which are meant to be for color accuracy. But then the Gigabyte on sRGB mode, the only thing it really missed was the contrast, a little bit of contrast. So in other words, you can reliably use the Gigabyte model here as a backup or second photo editing slash video editing monitor and still have pretty accurate results, and then game on it as well with your gaming profile. I think that's a really good thing for people who need that professional aspect but don't have time or money, say, to go out and get a calibrator and professionally calibrate their monitor, because basically if you're editing videos in these modes on these two off monitors that don't get it right, and you're like, hey, this looks pretty color accurate, and then you release the video or the image and it comes out on someone else's monitor all like messed up, that's the possibility you can run when you don't have the color accuracy on your monitor. So that's an important thing to mention, but then I will counter that and say, well, other features on the monitors all work really well. All their black equalizers, which can boost the black levels, and it's really good if you've got dark areas in competitive games where you need to see detail in dark areas. It can boost just the black areas. All three of them did an amazing job of that, whilst keeping the grays and the whites relatively the same. In other words, it just wasn't this washed out gamma booster. It actually did just boost the dark areas on the monitor, which was great to see all three of the monitor manufacturers here doing a good job of. Then there's other features on the monitors like crosshair overlays and things like that, which will take a long time if I went through each of these monitors individually. But the point I'm trying to make here is that outside the actual panel differences, there are differences from the manufacturers themselves in terms of how they implement their OSD and their color profiles. When it really boils down to it, if you're buying one of these 4K monitors, you're going to be buying either of these three options, I think. And so hopefully this video has helped and served well in terms of making the best choice for you. Me personally, again, I'm picking the one in the middle here as my overall pick. But that said, hopefully I outlined where the other two models can really get ahead and excel in. And me personally, I will say with a 27-inch, over time, it kind of grew on me a little bit more. It's as if my eyes, because I've been gaming on it for about a month now, it's as if my eyes started to get a little bit more used to it. So maybe if like after a year's time, it might just be the best pick for me. It was just a really weird effect where I just started to appreciate it more and more. Anyhow, with all those differences out of the way, there are some other minor differences like the actual stand and the weight of the monitor itself. The 32-inch Gigabyte by far being the heaviest choice, and then the ASRock being the lightest choice, and then the Alienware being somewhere in the middle. The ASRock does have pretty cool ambient lighting on the back, which does work really well to give a nice subtle glow behind the monitor if it's up against the wall. The Alienware does have RGB on the back, but it's very weak. Same with the Gigabyte, it's kind of the RGB on the back is just not doing really anything. So if there was any feedback for the two panel manufacturers there, it's like if you're going to put RGB on the monitor, just make it more functional. Like ASRock actually did a good job there in making a lightweight monitor, as well as having the RGB functionality be more useful. But then ASRock sort of missed the boat on their stand by not having it rotational adjustment. It's only got tilt, swivel, and height. Whereas the other two, Gigabyte and Alienware, they do have the extra fourth adjustment there for rotation. Anyhow, when it really boils down to it, hopefully this video helps you guys make the best choice for you. And look at all the pros and cons that I've talked about in today's video. But again, if I had to pick one, I'm picking the 32-inch Samsung QD OLED. I just think it's that great balance for immersion. And in fact, it's just so good to the point where I've struggled since I had this thing. I've struggled with PC gaming addiction. So that's how crazy good it is. And yeah, I've learned, at least in time, I've learned to control it. And another thing about these 4K monitors too, all of them, is that they're all really good and they just bring your old games, especially if you've got like an old catalog of games and they support 4K resolution, it brings those games back to life, like in a way I never thought possible. Like all my old games now just look incredible. And if it's anything, the gaming industry should just be focusing on gameplay and optimization, because I feel like the graphics are just so good. When I play some of these old games at 4K now, I'm like, yeah, I really don't need much more in terms of graphics. They just look amazing on these monitors. Absolutely incredible. And so even like a game like Warcraft 3, playing that, I'm enjoying myself more than I ever have been with any other monitors. So these OLEDs are just incredible. Some of the best things to happen to PC gamers over the last few years. And with them coming down in price, I feel like, especially if you want to make the best choice for you, just look at what is going to be the best, I guess, matching attributes of the monitor and what you need. Anyhow, guys, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. Also, if you have any questions or comments, be sure to drop a question down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Peace out for now. Bye.